So this is the hardest time of the day to do any kind of presentation, because actually it is an unnatural time for doing presentations and for listening to presentation. It's the natural time for siesta. And sorry to have to force you to stay here. I mean, you can, maybe some of you can sleep sitting. So we're going to talk about two new elements, and James already told me that he will help me a little bit because I'm not the total expert in financial instruments, and I hope that for questions you can then refer to him. The two big new elements of the life program, with one of them actually having come in only later on in the process, are the integrated projects and the financial instruments. And the integrated projects are something that stem from the idea, as I mentioned this morning, that there is the need to integrate environment and climate aspects across the board in all the policies. It's not really separable. We cannot say, I'll build a house and I forget about the environment. It's not possible. Anything really we do, every step we take, actually has an impact somehow on our environment, and so also on our climate. So that's what is behind the integrated projects. There is one really long definition of what integrated projects are. That's what regulation texts are for you. Actually, the funny thing about integrated projects, I think it's the only project type ever that is not only described in the regulation itself, but also in the recitals. You know, the recitals are these pages and pages and pages that are up front before regulation. Whereas, considering this, and so on and so on. That's the recitals. And normally, in that, you just describe things that will be later in the regulation. But since there were so many discussions going on about this in the negotiations, a lot of the information of what integrated projects are and what they should be are to be found in the recitals. But only a passionate lawyer like me would want to read that, so I will spare you. What are the purpose and the means of implementing integrated projects? Integrated projects, the purpose, as I said before, is really to integrate the mainstream environmental and climate policy into other policies, and also, and especially also in EU policies. And how is this supposed to be done? Well, the idea is there are plans and strategies, mainly union plans and strategies, that have been adopted by member states in directives, regulations, etc. And they have also found their way into national legislation, sometimes not, but mostly. But then somehow people, member states, whoever, don't get around to implementing them because they are so complex. They foresee so many actions that nobody really knows where to start and where to end, and where to find the money to do so in any case. So, for the sub-program for environment, there are 4 areas where these integrated projects will focus, and where we actually even defined it down to the exact plan that we want to be seen implemented. So we don't leave much space. You cannot say, I would do something for water, but I'll do something else then, a river-based management plan implementation. Not possible. It will not be an integrated project. Maybe a big project, but it's not going to be an integrated project. Same true for the air quality management plans. So for air, it's air quality management plans and nothing else. For waste, it's waste management plans. And for nature, it's prioritized action frameworks. Now, for people who don't know the specific area, this is just words. And that's okay. You're not the one who's supposed to implement them, because if you were, then you would know. It's just to give you an idea. These are plans. They are very, very important for us. That's why they were identified. Us, I mean, they are important for the Union because they cover big areas of our environment, and it's very, very important that they are implemented because they're supposed to improve the quality of the rivers. They're supposed to improve the quality of the air. They are supposed to make sure that waste is treated the way it should be treated. And they make sure that the actions that are necessary in Natura 2000 are done. So they don't just rest on a piece of paper and are nice to have somewhere in a drawer. For climate mitigation and climate adaptation, there are not so many EU-level plans that are obligatory, so there's a bit more bandwidth. So for climate mitigation, those would be greenhouse gas strategies, could also be actually strategies that are national, to my understanding, or regional. And for climate adaptation, it would be low carbon economy, climate resilient society plans and strategies. Now, for this year, I don't say you can forget about climate, not at all, but for this year, there will be no integrated projects under the sub-program for climate action. That means this is actually good. You can learn about integrated projects and then next year apply. The other tools, so this is the plan, so focusing really on specific plans. That's one of the ways we want to do this. And the other thing is, because these plans are too big to fund them, even with our funds, much too big. So all this we can do under LIFE would be give a little drop for starting the implementation of such a plan, and part of the project activity will be to get on board complementary funding. So you will have a project, and outside the LIFE project you will have many other projects, actions, etc. that are complementary. So it's really big, as I say, involve all relevant stakeholders and think big. So, for whom are they? Because you already heard, I said think big. If you haven't heard about them, then it's probably because you don't represent a competent authority that actually should be implementing that plan. And that should be actually the coordinating beneficiary. Remember, coordinating beneficiary is the one with the hat on his head, the one who is the leader in the consortium, in the group of people who do a project. So that actually should be a competent authority, and it should not be just any competent authority. It should be the competent authority for that plan, and it should be a competent authority who is able to face such a big project. So who is capable of coordinating besides the integrated project itself, so the LIFE project, the complementary actions co-funded by others outside the project. So it's like the Russian dolls, you know, there's a little Russian doll in the middle, that's the integrated project, and there's a big one around it, that's all the complementary ones. And the associated beneficiaries, that's a bit like in any traditional project, all kinds of public, private, commercial, non-profit organizations. Average size. We talked about average size before. I said, well, you know, contribution of the EU could be 1 million or a bit less or a bit more. Well, here we're talking 10 million on average. But we're also talking about very, very few. Because unfortunately, member states decided that, well, they didn't decide, they noticed that we don't have enough money, so they cut our overall budget, and they limited the number of integrated projects. So actually, we are stuck with 3 integrated projects per member state over 7 years. This is very little. Which means there will be, on average, 1 project under the sub-program for environment. There will be one under the sub-program for environment on energy efficiency and resource efficiency, so it could be water, waste, or air. That would be one. Then there would be one on nature, so that would be implementing the prioritized action framework. And there would be one either implementing a strategy or plan for climate change mitigation or climate change adaptation. Okay, just to give you an idea, this is really big, this is really special. Now here I tried to do what I actually liked drawing, but I think you can see it better here than when if I draw here. So the blue is the plan. Right? The plan has many, many actions. It could be 20, it could be 100, it depends really on the plan. That plan overall then has to be implemented. A part of it, so the yellow part, will be the LIFE project. The LIFE project with the co-funding, as you know it from the other LIFE projects, 60-40. So if it would be 60% 10 million, then 40% would then be added to that. So we have a total of, I don't know, whoever can calculate that quickly. But it gives you, it would be, say, 17 million more or less, 16, 17 million. So, in that LIFE project, just like for other LIFE projects, there would be no other EU funds funding that part. Okay, it would be kind of like a little not completely closed funding-wise inside. Technically, it would be supported by many actions outside that would be funded, for example, by national funds, by private funds, by EU funds. So you could imagine that a project would have co-funding from other funds. Actually, we want it to have it. It has to have at least one other funding source for complementary actions. I don't know whether that is clear as a concept. So you have to have these two projects, so to say. I mean, one project is a LIFE project, and then many other actions outside funded by others. The ultimate goal is, so what does implementing mean? We really mean implementing. We really mean from A to Z. We need long-term commitments. It doesn't mean that the LIFE project does everything. It's much too small. It will do part of it, maybe action 1 and 20 and 35. And all the rest will have to be ensured through other means. Okay? It has to be a large geographical area. For air, it is specially defined that it has to be at least a 5-city project. So at least 5 cities have to be involved. It can be just any kind of actions inside. It can be good practice. It has to be efficiently and well coordinated. And actually, I mean, many people say, well, why don't you give us more money? And that's not fair, and the EU should give us all the money to do all these things. Well, the thing is, actually, member states at one point in time committed to do that with their own means. So in a way, we're being nice to member states. We're giving them money to do the job that they should have done. I mean, yeah. But of course, that's just a bit of a joke. So how does it work? What's the mechanisms? What are the mechanisms of it? Well, for the submission, it's not through e-proposal. We don't expect a whole lot of applications, so we think we can handle it on our own. This is actually, as I mentioned in the beginning of this morning, it's one of the few project types that we will still be managing. We at the Commission will not be managed by the external agency for the time being. It will be offline, so, well, it says there Word and Excel files. That actually is a mistake. I think we now decided that it should be PDF. But, well, so it's a digital format, whatever it's called in the end. And what is kind of nice about it, there are 2 stages. Because it's so big, we don't want everyone to do all the work. We first ask everyone for a concept note, so a project idea, a few pages, and an idea about which additional funds you want to mobilize. And that is then handed in. Then there is a question and answer session that is virtual. So we will be communicating via the web, answering questions to everyone, of course, anonymously, so that everyone can see on our website what are the questions. Maybe also we notice that everybody is a bit weak on this or that point, and then you write an answer to a question that really wasn't asked, but make sure that people have some guidance. And we will also say, well, this or that concept note is not even, it doesn't go at all in the right direction. Maybe it does not address at all a plan. Well, then, be clear that it wouldn't fit. And then in the second stage, there would be a full proposal, including a letter, at least one letter of intent from at least one funding source outside the project. So let's say the regional fund that commits that they will collaborate. The implementation would be done also differently than traditional projects. Traditional projects normally last, I was asked this before, well, 3-4 years, some also up to 10 years. I mean, it really depends on the project, on the difficulties they have encountered or haven't encountered. But here we think from the beginning that it will be long-term projects, and so the reporting will be cyclical, and then there will be only a more defined budget for the first 2 years, and then after 2 years you'll be able to define a bit better for the next 2 years, so it will be a bit more, going along the needs, because we don't really don't really know how exactly this will work, what difficulties will come up. Some of them we can already anticipate, others we can't. So it's a trial process. There will be more flexibility as a consequence of that. The payments will be done according to the periodic planning, and actually it will be possible for competent authorities to, we call that a cascading grant. So they get a grant from us, and then there's maybe one little sub-action in the big integrated project where they want to give grants themselves. And that will be possible. Normally that's not the way you do it, but since this is the this type of project, we will allow that. So, examples. I've got examples for all these areas. I believe that is really over the top to go into all these areas, because in a way it's the same concepts, that's for sure. It's the same kind of thing. And I just would like to do a bit of, let's say, voting. Who would want to know something about, so water, implementation of the river basin management plans? Who would want to know something about the air management plans? Who would want to know something about waste management plans? And who would want to know something about prioritized action frameworks? So I call water. Okay. 2. How about air? Okay. 3, 4. How about waste? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How about nature? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, okay, that was not very clear as a message, but I am afraid water, we can talk about it afterwards. Such a nice diagram too, Look at that, it took me hours, Air. I think air we had quite a few, didn't we? So, as I said before, 5 cities, and then it's 1 IP, and then there are complementary projects. That could be 5 complementary projects, that could be more. Huh? You have 1 coordinating beneficiary of the IP of the integrated project, and they could be, for example, the regional authority having 5 cities underneath him. They are all associated beneficiaries. And, for example, it could be that they do, inside the LIFE project, demonstrative actions. They put filters, and they show that this works. But, at the same time, they also get money in, which is outside the LIFE project, by making polluters pay, for example. They say, okay, cars that circulate on that day, they have to pay a fine. Or cars that have that or that, they do have to, I don't know what, pay something. So at the same time, they have income from elsewhere. They could also have a local fund. They could have structural funds, activate structural funds to then put into place air filters all over the place, not just on a demonstrative level. So they could activate complementary funding, which would be additional to the LIFE project, and all together they would implement the air quality plan. Waste. Again, waste management plans. They would have to fulfill the objectives, of course, of their waste management plan. And again, there would have to be a link to other sources of funding. For example, for waste, you often think right away of large infrastructures. For example, a center for separating the waste, for maybe recycling the waste. And so that money, since it's large infrastructure and since LIFE is not a large infrastructure type of funding instrument, would be funded by structural funds outside the integrated project itself. It would have to implement the roadmap of recommendations that is in the waste plan, and so on. And the one thing, of course, is always important in all of these projects. It's never going to be just the competent authority doing their thing. What is absolutely obligatory for integrated project is a strong involvement of stakeholders. So stakeholders meaning the local authorities, the NGOs, the other, the citizen as such, civil society as they call it. So everybody has to be brought into the boat. It's not just about getting the money in. Although this is for nature, but maybe it gives it's another good picture of what is like. You see that all these different, there's the green thing that is actually the LIFE project, okay? The green actions and the green circle on top. That is the LIFE project. Again, the blue is the prioritized action framework, so that's the plan that they need to implement. And all the others are other funding sources that do things that LIFE doesn't. For example, not only have we here the cohesion fund for the large infrastructures, or the agriculture fund for the agriculture measures, for training farmers. We also have, for example, the European Social Fund for management bodies and institutional capacity building. We might have rural development funds for ecological green tourism. All these things might be used, may be used, for implementing that framework. So all in all, it could be just a minor part that is the LIFE integrated project. So difference between apart from the, let's say, obvious difference of size, but that's not really the content difference, the real difference. The difference actually is this putting into place, implementing a plan from A to Z. It's the emphasis on the coordination, the role that really there has to be a lot of coordination. That's part of the, not just the project management, it's really a key part of the project. But there's also something positive always to these things. There's much more support from the Commission side and much more guidance throughout the project. Because in the end, it's only a handful instead of hundreds. Just to give you an idea regarding project management, because I mean, there's not only the selection of projects. I was asked earlier, why does it take so long? Well, we don't just select the project, we also follow them. It's the same people. And of course, for example, I only follow some 50 to 60 projects. Some colleagues follow 100 projects. You can imagine that in itself is already quite a bit. If we only follow a handful of projects, it's of course much more intensive and rewarding for both sides. Since this is so complex, and already application is quite complex, there's another project type that helps those who want to dare the adventure of doing an integrated project, and that's called the Technical Assistance Project. The Technical Assistance Project will allow you to prepare for doing an integrated project. So it could be a good idea if you are a competent authority in thinking about such a big endeavor, that you apply this year for Technical Assistance Project. Theoretically or even practically, you could even make it still for an integrated project, but normally it would be then best that you next year then start with integrated project, with trying for an integrated project. So these are quite small projects, as you can see, but of course you can only get that project if you commit to submitting a proposal for an integrated project. And there are only a handful. So let's say, for example, this year we think there will be 5 to 6 integrated projects and 5 to 6 technical system projects at the end of the process. So now we come to the financial instruments. The other new feature, new feature. Why financial instruments under life? That was actually a question that was, as James mentioned, quite hotly discussed among the member states. Because they felt that life being a financial instrument, having a financial instrument under it was maybe not a good idea. But there are financial instruments under life, and actually they are mainly meant to test new ways of mobilizing or crowding in, as it's apparently called, private finance to help finance, for example, biodiversity protection or climate change actions, for example, helping with energy efficiency. Right? So it also is meant to use the little money that we have in a way that where it multiplies itself in a way, you know, because you can do more with a loan in comparison than you can with a grant. If you look at the costs it implies and what comes out of it in the long run, at least that's the way it appears, and it has been confirmed by studies like James' company, I think, did, right? I always now talk under the control of James. He knows much better about this. They are there to address specific market barriers. So, what are market barriers? Actually, well, people will hesitate to invest in certain things when they're new. They will hesitate about investing in things where they're not sure that they can make money with it in the long run. And so that's what financial instruments are trying to do, they are, or hopefully will be able to show that things are or will be commercially viable in the near future, and that's why it is good to give grants to companies or private persons who invest in these elements, because they in the future will be able to make money with it, and then of course the money will go back and it'll be a win-win situation for the bank and for the persons carrying it through. They also, they kind of cover the higher risk that is inherent in these innovative environmental projects, and they facilitate the market uptake, so the possibility to have climate and biodiversity friendly actions, which not necessarily are, as I said, commercially viable right now, or not all are maybe visible on the market. And they're also meant to complement traditional grants. As James mentioned earlier, it's mainly a market for private business, so small and medium-sized enterprises. By the way, I always say small and medium-sized enterprises. That doesn't mean that big enterprises are excluded. I just want to make sure that this is clear. We are open to all of them. But of course, they are the ones who maybe need more little push and support. So there are two financial instruments. You see the average size. You also may correct me on the average size, but that's what I kind of read between the lines, James. So quite different. The NCFF and the PF4EE. Well, I'll tell you in a little while what these stand for. So these are the two pilots that are there to green the financial instruments and widen the financing opportunities for green investments. One is the PF4EE. It actually means private financing for energy efficiency, and it is there to finance activities, as James described it earlier, to improve energy efficiency. I'll go a bit more into details on that in a little while. And actually, they are the link to the, actually not beneficiary, but a link to the recipient of the loan or the whatever support it is then, is through the European Investment Bank. So you have actually the money from the Commission goes to the European Investment Bank. European Investment Bank passes it on to intermediaries in the member states, who then pass it on to the recipient. Okay? That is the private financing for energy efficiency. And the other one is even more innovative. It is the National Capital Financing Facility, or NCFF, which is meant for funding climate action and biodiversity projects, which fall into that category I just described earlier on, that are not, or not now, commercially viable, but might become in the future. So, the objectives, they're pretty much what I already said before, and especially also what James said. It's supposed to make lending more sustainable, so make it easier to lend money to do something that's good for the climate, but actually always will also be good for your own pocket, because if you save energy, it's sure that that's going to save you money. I mean, let's be clear about this. So this is a clear win-win situation, but still the market does not seem to have taken it up as it should and could, and this is actually one of the instruments to help the market do that. So this is to encourage private commercial banks to address the energy efficiency sector and to increase lending for energy efficiency to respond and to actually implement the member states' national energy efficiency actions and plans, and through that also actually union legislation on energy efficiency. Wow. This is a very full slide. And I think I will simply skip it because it just tells some insider things about what the role of the EIB is. The role of the local banks, that might be more interesting because that would be the bank with whom the recipient, if you are a potential recipient, would be in contact. They are engaged with the European Investment Bank. They negotiate a contract with the European Investment Bank, and then they make sure, because they know the local situation, that they get the clientele to implement these plans that exist and to give them loans that help them do that. They have good knowledge of the potential local beneficiaries, and that's why actually they're an added value to the program. So this is the structure. As I said, you have the European Commission, then European Investment Bank, then the intermediaries, and at the end, the one who actually wants to do the project. To give you an example, because this is always a bit, when you just look at the structure, it's a bit overwhelming. I think this makes it quite clear. Example here is a small family hotel. They need to improve their energy efficiency, so they want to retrofit the hotel or many hotels, whatever. And so they need a loan. In this case, it's quite a more substantial loan, but it could be lower, it could be more. They go to the commercial bank. The commercial bank says, are you aligned with the Energy Efficiency Directive? Are you in line with the National Energy Efficiency Plan? And yes, they are, and so they get the money. But about the timing, I think you already said something, James. It's probably going to be put in place then as of next year, so I'll leave that. Oh, sorry, that's wrong.
Well, the issue is the time for the EIB to take the money from the Commission and contract with the banks. Now, the idea is that to get reach, they need banks that will potentially do more than one member state. The member states themselves in the Life Committee were making it clear that they wanted to make sure that small countries like Latvia did not miss out from this. So obviously the investment bank is going to have to spend more time than it perhaps would have done to contract out to get the geographic coverage. I suppose, but the key point in this is just to make that under business as usual, the family hotel would not have got the loan. So it's the life money as a risk share facility is actually making the thing happen.
Okay. So, this slide, I think, might be a reaction actually to many questions that were raised. But this is something we already have. Why do we need the life money for this? Well, you can see here, yes, there are numerous member states programs that provide funding for energy efficiency, either themselves or through even EU money. But this is often in form of grants and for public sector activity. So, plus since it's grants, it doesn't cover the full cost, not like a loan, right? Which you have to pay back, but still. So this actually is a good complementation of the grant schemes. And PF4EE will test this new approach, and if it then works, it can be scaled up by some financial instruments under the structural funds, where the money is, so to say. It must be said that this is, this allows really, so in a way, life really again shows that it's a demonstration program, because this is a demonstration of something that we would like to see in a much larger scale elsewhere, funded elsewhere. NCFF, the Natural Capital Financing Facility. Now, for biodiversity and climate adaptation, these are areas where there is not much funding around. Why? Because biodiversity, many people just think, oh, well, you know, why should I invest in butterflies? It doesn't really pay off, or just saying butterflies, but you know. Because people are not so clear about the other added values they might have that actually could turn into being commercializable. Also, the same for climate adaptation. I mean, climate adaptation, there actually is quite a big interest group in that. You can imagine which one it is. It's the insurance companies. The big insurance companies, they're really getting very worried about climate change because that hits their resources, right? But still, I mean, where are the opportunities there? So, what this is all about is to encourage investment in revenue-generating or cost-saving projects that promote natural capital meaning nature that is actually seen as a capital and used as a capital, which at the same time is then used or is the basis for biodiversity and adaptation objectives. So typically, these projects will have a twofold effect. They will have a savings effect or a gain effect for the recipient or for someone else. And at the same time, it will have a positive effect, a positive side effect, in one case on biodiversity, in the other case on climate adaptation. And it's to demonstrate that private investors, to demonstrate to private investors, so convince private investors that it is attractive to invest in the sector. And it's meant to build up what they call a project pipeline, so meaning making a list of potential projects that then in the second round will actually be funded through the instrument, and probably not within life then, but rather under another program. So the pilot phase, that's what we are now, 2014 to 2017. It's for testing the approaches, different ways of supporting that type of financing. The pilot and the final phase, we're talking about 10 million for the support facility. So there'll be a support facility. What's a support facility? The European Investment Bank is a bank. Well, that was a nice sentence. But they also have some know-how, or they buy in some know-how about nature, natural capital, for example, or climate adaptation. And these experts help them to identify projects that could work. So it's like they support them in the evaluation of the potential projects. So who could be the potential recipients and projects of the project, the recipients of the loans for the project? Well, again, local authorities, small or bigger enterprises, land managers, or also called farmers elsewhere. And it could be, for example, for paying for ecosystem services. Now, in ecosystem services, you know what an ecosystem service is? Well, ecosystem service is, for example, the soil. If you have healthy soil, it will filter the rainwater or whatever. It will even filter air. So that is an ecosystem service. It's a service that only healthy soil will give you. Dead soil will not do that. It will, because there are no bacteria in it, there are no little animals in it that will do that service. And so actually that has a value, but the value we don't really give it to it. So it could be that this project could serve for that. This is just one example I'm going to give you. You have a situation which is not uncommon. In this case, it's a brewery. It probably is in Belgium. So it's a brewery, and it gets water from a stream, and the stream always used to have top water quality, and now the water quality isn't all that good anymore. What happened? Well, actually, further upstream, there are several farmers, or in this case, I made it a bit easier, it's just one, but actually there are several farmers. They are all doing their job correctly. They don't actually put too much fertilizer, but still, the water quality went down. So it's nothing illegal that they're doing. It's not a case of paying for something they do wrong. Actually, they wouldn't mind doing something for the water quality. They're neutral about it, but simply they don't have the money to do that, right? So the brewer says, well, okay, I'll give you the money, but I don't have it either like that, but I go to the bank. It's good for me because my water is clean. It's good for the farmer because actually he also wanted that, and it's good for biodiversity because the animals are happy because the soil is better, the water is better, etc. So this is an example of what a project could be like. Yep, and I'm through with this part, and I think it would be good if you could give some support for questions, James.
Stunned silence.
Okay, is there somebody with question or some comments or something?
The question about this all financial instruments, as I understand, it will go to something, our local bank, commercial bank, or state development bank, something like that. Who makes decision? It is this local bank decision to give this loan or on some support, or it goes through European Investment Bank? And how long it will be, this decision-making process?
Well, the local bank is under contract and borrows money from the European Investment Bank. It is therefore, that contract with the European Investment Bank, he has to use that sum of money on this instrument. He can't use that money somewhere else. He's paying the EIB an interest. So it's not in his benefit to hang on to the money. So there's an incentive on the local bank to lend on the money. Otherwise, he's paying interest on a sum of money that's not earning him anything. He has to he has to loan on the basis of the program. The people coming to the local bank have to demonstrate that their loan opportunity, if you like, supports the wider life objectives. So the life money comes in at the top to the EIB, gets lent on to the intermediary. It's available funding, therefore, for the potential life, people interested in life objectives to get money to do that. So it comes together in the contract between the local bank and the person borrowing the money. So like the example this morning, this guy wants to invest in energy efficiency. The bank won't do it at the moment, the risk's too high. The idea is that as long as he can demonstrate that the investment in energy efficiency is consistent with life objectives and national policy objectives, and the risk is not too great, that the additional money to reduce the risk is not having an effect, then he will get the loan. Obviously, the reason it's a test is we don't know how big that risk is. So it's testing to see how much money you need to get extra lending. It may be that the banks are so risk averse that even having some additional money going into the loan still will not incentivize them to lend. So you might find that the risk share facility is either used up too quickly, in which case it's not much better than the grant, or alternatively you might find actually it's only the margin risk is actually quite small, and actually you get quite a lot of extra lending from the banks. And therefore you get high leverage because the loans are obviously repaid. The intermediary bank collects those loans back after the end of the project and can recycle it back into further projects, which is where the leverage comes in because the loan just goes round and round. Now, I think you're talking about 20 years. So the intermediary bank has 20 years to get its money back. So either very good projects in the first round or improving projects over a longer period of time. But I think the EIB gives the intermediary 20 years. So if it works, this is a sustainable, which is why they want to use life money, because the potential is to have a really sustainable instrument, which otherwise would not have been brought forward by the market. But the big uncertainty is just how much risk banks are willing to offset against the money from life. So, but it'll be up to the member states to come up with project pipelines that can really demonstrate and make use of that extra facility. Which is why in the P4FE, it's based in the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan. So the member state, Latvia in this case, needs to be able to take that plan and talk to the people that it's trying to prioritise through that plan and say, look guys, can you come up with some projects for loan finance, and we'll see if we can get it off the EIB. So it's a bit more complicated, but it has the potential to have a lot more effect in the longer run.
And when you plan to start it? It's this year, next
year?
Well,
it starts straight away.
Straight
in
away?
Hang on. The first thing is that the money that's transferred to the EIB has to be contracted out to the banks. So the big unknown is how long it will take EIB to find the intermediary banks that it's happy to lend to. Because don't forget, the EIB's lending money to the intermediary. So the EIB needs to be confident that the national bank will give him, be in a position to give them money back at some point. The other complication is, as I said, is the political one, which under the life, the EIB is under pressure to make sure it does not just privilege a few large banks operating in the big countries, but to find financial intermediaries in all the member states, or the bulk of the member states, which again will add time and complexity to their contracting procedure. A personal view is it's going to take at least a year, probably 2, to get a sufficient number of contracts with banks to see any real effect. On the other hand, it's only this year, I think, that the member states have had to sign off on their national energy plans. And I'm not sure every member state has done it. So by the time is quite good, because it will give a year or so for the energy plans to get finalised and for the relevant actors to be engaged in that action plan. At the same time, EIB will be contracting with local banks. So it's one of these things that won't happen this year, probably won't happen next year, but 2016.
And is it possible to combine, if we take the typical life project with 60% grant, then 40% is our money, our part money, and we take loan for this 40% or 30 or 20% through this intermediate bank? It's allowed or not?
I don't think, Dorothy will know, but I don't think there's any restriction on, as long as the grant awarding body, in this case the Commission, is confident that the matched funding is there and can be put on the table, that's fine. But if you're borrowing from the bank to fund your action grant project, it implies that action grant project's got to be generating some money. And if it's generating money that can be repaid back to the bank, then why is it an action grant project in the first place? Where's the money coming from? You would not expect an action grant project necessarily to be generating a substantial revenue flow. If it can be generating a substantial revenue flow, why bother with the action grant process and go straight to the bank? So I wouldn't rule out hypothetically that you could borrow the money from one scheme and use it to grant fund, match fund a grant funded project. But I'm not sure the logic would generate people wanting to do that particularly.
If we talk about the commercial projects, is it true? But if we talk, for example, for projects where is the natural capital, for example, we I don't know, build some information house or something like that, and the beneficiary is a local municipality or something like that. They haven't so much money in 1 year, and then they take loan and pay back it for, I don't know, 10 years or 20, as you say, in this way. Then it's not revenues, but there is some budget planning for local municipality, and they put each year this part which we need to give back for the loan. If loan is with more lower interest rate, one question, and guarantees other question, it's more cheaper in this case.
Possibly. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure anybody's ever thought through precisely all the possible scenarios through which people will operate these schemes. The fundamental point is that there are a range of projects which generate revenues, and which both for the project promoters and for public sector paying for these things, much better to do it through a financial instrument than do it through a grant. It's better because the person is incentivized to generate and look for the revenues, and it's good for the public sector because he's not spending grant when actually the market would actually fund it. So, but it's a test. I mean, nobody really knows. I think that the natural capital facility is more immature in development. It's not obvious to me that there's a lot of projects out there which would generate revenues or cost savings, which can be captured in these sorts of instruments. But you can see if you're investing in natural capital that potentially generates a tourism flow, which you can capture. It's an obvious example to me of how the facility might work. Or if you've got landowners who are willing to forego an income for ecosystem services, which you can be using to fund investment. It's up to you guys. You've got to be the creative ones. If people in nation states aren't creative, this is not going to work. So you're good. You need to come up with all these ideas, discuss them with the national contact point, and then put out all the propaganda. Okay.
No, there is a question.
I got a bit lost with all that information. So as far as I understand, you have two options. The first option, the 60% is paid by European Union and 40% by ourselves, yes?
In a grant.
Yeah, that's the first option. And the second option is a bank, European bank, is kind of giving a loan, like an insurance.
Yes, it's just an ordinary bank loan.
And you're paying the whole amount of money.
You have to pay back the loan.
Yes, but it's obvious that nobody wants to take that second chance. Why? Because that's the big difference. Either you pay just 40% or either you pay 100% of your amount that you need.
Well, it's an investment. You're investing in an option that will generate you a revenue. I mean, nobody's going to borrow money from the bank if it doesn't lead to an investment return.
So, I mean, my project is about 1 million euro.
But are you going to borrow money to make money?
No.
Well, then it's no option, is it? You just have to go with the grant. You only ever take a loan out if you can pay it back, and you're only going to want to pay it back if that process generates you a profit.
Yeah, and this is
yeah. So, but if you're but in the energy efficiency context, investment will save you money, and potentially will generate a revenue stream, which is sufficient to allow you to pay back a loan off a period. Now, the problem is that too often, from a social welfare point of view, because you get some of the environmental benefits are not in the price of energy. Yeah. From a social welfare, people are not investing enough in energy efficiency because those returns are not high enough, and as a consequence, the bank won't lend the money. So life money is making the difference. So it's reducing the risk to the banker, so he can make the loan where otherwise he wouldn't have made the loan, and you're getting the benefit from your energy savings to pay the loan back. And the loan should be that bit cheaper because obviously you're not covering the full risk to the bank.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes, I think perhaps one thing, there's a big health warning on all these financial instruments. This is only for projects that can generate some money. Yeah, otherwise, why it's a grant project. Okay. Any investment bankers in the room that really want to?
If there is no more questions, then we can continue with the next presentation.
Yeah, just you mentioned shortly whether, or asked whether it's possible to have this, so co-funding with loans. Well, yes, it is possible, but on the other hand, the grant may not be used during the project for making profit. So, I mean, if you make profit, you know, so yeah, yes.
No, it's a question about, you mentioned in various presentations that it's not possible mixed two European funds or two Europe support. This is one support is grant from the life, other support is loan from the life or AEB or something like that. Mm-hmm. This is my question: is it possible mixed or it's not possible?
I think the point is that there's no point. I mean, for practical reasons, they're effectively separate, because I can't see any obvious reason why you'd want to join them up.
Is the discussion over about this topic? Okay, James, then you can.
Oh, well, I got
your next presentation.
Okay. Normally, I mean, there are a number of these workshops taking place across member states, and national contact points wanted to use the workshop as an opportunity to sort of flag up interesting projects from the country for the benefit of people interested in the programme. We agreed, though, in the case of Latvia, that perhaps there might be some interesting projects outside of Latvia that would potentially be more interesting to you. So what I've done is to, in discussion with the Commission in Latvia, pick 3 projects, just to give you some idea of, basically they're just ideas for which you might want to pick up in your own projects. There's 3 projects, so I'm going to go through them quite quickly because we're now running out of time a little bit. These slides will be on the website, so you can explore in more detail. You can follow up with these projects, I'm sure, with the Commission if you have a particular interest in them. But the first one is really something that demonstrates the sorts of approaches to climate mitigation that the LIFE programme would be interested in. We've got one which is probably a bit more illustrative of an adaptation project. And then I've got a third one which is about pesticides, which is not obviously about mitigation or adaptation. But we thought it had some interesting features to it which might be interesting to whether you're doing a mitigation or an adaptation project. And these projects have been selected as best practice. So to the extent to which these projects have actually tried to demonstrate the thinking behind LIFE programme and some of the added value that people are looking for, these are good examples of that. So, and I'm not personally familiar with the project, so I'm going to have to sort of try and take you through some of the thoughts about this. Well, one of the things about the new LIFE programme is that it's about looking for new systems, changing behaviours. And one of the obvious things to do that is looking for economic instruments. So instead of just relying traditionally on regulation and better enforcement, in the climate change field there are clearly precedents and examples of setting up carbon markets to try and promote behavioural change and provide incentives. And two Italian regions got together to try and develop a carbon market to try and avoid reliance on regulation. They did what you should be doing, which is thinking about how the project fits with wider EU policy objectives and strategies. And the actual mechanics of this is probably less interesting than the sort of the context, but essentially what they were trying to do was provide a standard situation where if your project generated emission savings, you would get a credit for it, which you could then use in the market. So a few things about the project. I suppose the first thing is the strategic framework, the strategic context. So one of the points which I think we're trying to emphasize this morning is that the new program and the current program is trying to have people come forward with projects which are a bit more strategic, who are understanding how the project fits into a wider system and isn't just focused on just a few mechanical sort of actions within the project. So in this case, we've got a clear attempt to match the LIFE project to regional strategies for climate change. And it's this thinking that actually sits behind the integrated project more widely, using LIFE to better support strategic interventions and not just little bite-sized technical interventions which don't have quite such the impact. Again, looking at other synergies, so in this case looking at soil management benefits, looking at partnerships and involving SMEs in it, improving awareness. All these buzzwords you will have heard from the program, the introductions we've been giving today, are illustrated in this particular project. I mean, what it actually did, you can understand it. I don't quite know how they actually did develop the credit market, but the point is that they were trying to demonstrate and pilot this particular instrument. It's trying to change behaviour, it's trying to change incentives in the market, and obviously quite a modern approach to policy intervention. So it was a demonstration. It's known that these projects don't always produce the sorts of results and outcomes that they were supposed to, but in this case, they engaged quite a range of businesses in the market. They managed to save 250 tonnes of carbon. It's now seen as an illustrative approach which should be demonstrated and replicated. And it's now winning awards and so on. So the replication and transferability, the EU added value, which we keep talking about, is clearly demonstrated by the project. On the adaptation side, we were talking about river basins and taking a slightly broader strategic and spatial context for interventions and LIFE projects. Again, a multiple range of objectives it's trying to achieve, largely linked to water. Again, clear policy benefit, this time in terms of the Water Framework Directive. So again, spatial, bringing people together, got a spatial context, different cities with different river running through their patch, bringing together the stakeholders in support of the project, having some technical effects and technical advice in the project. So again, the mechanics of the project are probably less interesting than the strategic points I'm trying to make about the value of the project. But just because it's a demonstration project doesn't stop you doing research. Part of the project, getting information, testing out the problem, testing out solutions. So they did various modelling of, in this case, hydrology, some risk assessment work as the basis of new solutions. So again, you can see it's a demonstration project, developing new technologies and techniques, in this case a modelling technique, but it's owned by a set of partners, applying it to a real-world policy need, and getting the stakeholder support behind it. And finally, the pesticides one, which again, I think is just illustrative of some of these more generic points, which is that, again, the strategic framework really clear. In this case, the pesticides directive. Clear spatial framework for this, in this case, a farming basin in Greece, with the object of trying to manage pesticide inputs. So, again, taking a strategic approach, not just looking at pesticides in isolation, but as an input to the whole farm, trying to understand how that particular problem interacts with the wider problem, and as part of the project, having, again, EU added value in mind. So partnership, clear deliverables, and something that's basically just capable of dissemination to at least similar areas across Europe. So again, the mechanics of what the project did, and you can go on the website and find out. So again, it's got some of the things we've been talking about: testing and development, piloting, demonstrating it in field, real-world applications. A set of outcomes are linked to the actual reduction in pesticide inputs, generating the sustainable benefits that we want to offer. Some clear benefits. Again, it perhaps is an illustrative of the point that Dorothy was making earlier, that actually the performance and outcome indicators of the project need to be linked back to the impact indicators that are being monitored at the level of the programme. So again, you've got sorts of outcome indicators that can quite easily be translated into measures that help you measure the impact of the programme as a whole. So again, I think this illustrates this point about having a very clear sense of what your outcomes are, which follows from you having clear objectives, which follows from a clear strategic framework. And again, it's what we said. Read the stuff, read the annual work programme, read the project application. It emphasises strategy, clear objectives, clear logic, partnership, engagement, EU added value. I think if you almost need to build a mantra into your project designs. If any of those things are missing, you're substantially going to relegate yourself down the ranking of projects. So, I don't know if I've enthused you or put you off, but you now know what you've got to do, even if it's a bit daunting. Any clarifications? I rushed through them rather quickly, but I think the general points are the more important than the detail of the projects. Okay? I think people are about adding off. Did you say something? No?
Maybe you can tell something about the main goal of this project and this result. How was this affected?
Well, I can't really. I mean, there's a lot of detail in there. I don't know the projects sufficiently well to go on about them. The point is not the mechanics of the individual project, but what it means for project design in the new programme. Yeah? I mean, they're all delivering against clear objectives, which are themselves clearly related to life programme objectives, and understand a strategic requirement to operate. So again, and replication. So basically your project design just can't be, I've got a problem here, I've got a little solution here, and I can do it myself with a little money. That's really not what life's about anymore. It's about a much more holistic and a much more collaborative approach to problem solving.
James, I think we did it. They're completely...
We've exhausted them.
Exhausted.
But it's a really exciting
This is what you call too much information.
There's too much information, but just to distill it down, there are big environmental problems in Latvia, I'm sure, which would benefit from intelligent, partner-based strategic approaches. And if you can come up with that, you've got the basis of a project for life.
Well, if you have survived this meeting, you already have a very good potential to survive the next month with applications.
Okay, so I guess we are finished today. And in conclusion, then, the ministry is hoping that there will be some big projects accepted in the commission. So we hope your ideas is the best, and the applications will be the best of the best. So,
yeah, I mean, I think, just to follow up just on that point, sorry, I know people want to go, but I think the idea of the integrated project, as you said, there's only going to be a few, and if people are really interested in them, and anybody in the audience that's sitting in a ministry, national ministry, that has the potential to leverage the sort of monies that are required, really can benefit from early thinking now, and don't wait. Start thinking. You can get a feasibility study off and running under the, what's it called, the preparatory action? What's the grant that gives you the 100 grand?
That's the technical assistance,
technical
but
assistance.
That's only for integrated projects.
That's what I'm talking about, integrated projects. So for people probably in the ministries who are interested in integrated projects, now you've got to start thinking now, I think. Is there anybody in the ministry? Is there anybody from the adaptation unit or climate change unit in the ministry? No? Okay, well, I'll shut up then.
They already left to think about it. They're already in their offices preparing.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed.
Anybody else?
okay, then thank you. Droši vēlaties, varat vēl uzcienāties ar uzkodām vai kā tēju, var pakomunicēt.